What's happening, everyone? This is Zach Edwards with another episode of the Adventure Box Podcast. That's right. So, in this podcast, we talk about all things history. Now, interesting enough, last week we were talking about it. It was Thanksgiving weekend. Everything was a little low key. We weren't doing a whole episode every day because it was Thanksgiving. So, we went a little bit further. And today we're going to be talking more about ancient Israel. And here's the interesting thing. So we will be going through the Bible. We'll also be going through the Quran. We'll go through Jewish tradition, oral tradition, and a few other things. But here's the thing. For anyone that says, I don't like the Jews, or I don't like the Bible, here's the thing. They are an actual people from ancient history. They're an ancient civilization. You have to know about them. If you're going to learn about any ancient civilization, they are one of the most influential when it comes to modern days. So knowing about the history of the Jews or the Israelites is essential, just as much as learning about the Egyptians, or just as much as learning about the Romans. Remember, the Romans aren't there anymore. Yet we study about them a lot because their empire was so huge. Persians, Mesopotamians, Egyptians. Egyptians are the only ones that are still there. And so, besides them, Israel is also still there. So we need to be able to learn about all these people, and we need to take from the historical documents that we have, which include the Bible, because it's both a historical document and a religious document. And I've got something to show you to prove this. Not the religious part. This is a secular podcast. But I'm going to show you some things that are amazing. Truthfully amazing. And when it comes to filling in the gaps of what we don't know. So let's go into it. So what are we going to talk about today? Again, we're going to be talking about the start of ancient Israel, which goes all the way back to, no, I won't say the creation, because that's not considered ancient Israel. That's creation. Not going back to the flood before. We're not going back to any specific point minus the actual starting of the people of Israel, which is the forefather, Abraham. Now, someone say, that's someone's in the Bible. That doesn't mean it's actually true. Oh, but wait a second. What if there was actually proof that Abraham did exist, coming from multiple sources? Then you're like, Okay, I'm interested in hearing this. I want to know how you can prove that Abraham was alive back then. Okay, so again, with all history, there's a little bit of skepticism that has to be put in with everything because you weren't there, I wasn't there. All we have is the documents that were actually written. Now you say, we can't trust the Bible. Well, actually, some of you can. Here's an interesting thing. If you don't trust the Bible, let's go to the opposition in a sense. Who are the opposite of the Jews? You probably say the Muslims, right? Okay, so you have two opposing parties, and yet they both have the same origin. Yeah, that's right. They both have the same origin. Okay, you're like, okay, now I'm a little bit more intrigued. What are you talking about? The same origin. Well, they both stemmed from Abraham. Ishmael was the son of Abraham first. He was the first son of Abraham. Then there was Isaac, the first son under Sarai, his wife, and so two different people. And yet, what are the documents that actually have this? Okay, so there are what? There's the Bible. The Bible, mostly the books of the Torah, the first 5 books of Moses. But you also have the Quran. Now remember, the Quran was written around 700, well, no, it wasn't even written until after 800 AD. So it was like 2,000 years later. But it's interesting because they have so many details in here that are not provided in the Bible of what happened to Abraham. So again, grain of salt, because we're talking about two completely different groups. Now, what about a third witness? Third witness would be the oral traditions of the Jews, and the oral traditions that were then put into well before the turn of the century. And this would be the I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's called not the Torah. The next book that the Jews, another book that the Jews go to, is the the Midrash and the Talmud. And we're going to get these two documents after we tell the story that comes from the Bible, and then joins with the Quran, and then we'll ended up with those two documents, those two scriptures. Again, these are not Christian documents; these are Jewish documents. So we're going to bring all these together, and so yes, I am now saying that because I have multiple witnesses, if we were going to a trial, and we had the journal of a person that was being charged or was going up to going into the case, you say, well, that's just one witness, that's just his writings. Well, then you have a journal from the person that was right next to him during that same time, okay, or even a little bit afterwards. You go, okay, that's two witnesses, but that's not solid. Well, in the courts, if these people were complete opposite sides, then yes, there would be some validity, some understanding and truth that would come from for the judge to accept that this one thing happened. And then what if there's a third one that came in? So you have the Bible, the Quran, and the Talmud, and the Midrash. The Midrash. So you have these 4 documents all coming together, all different witnesses, all the same thing. So let's go into it. Okay. So this is very exciting because I actually didn't know a lot of these things. I knew what the Bible said. I've studied it for years. I've studied history and I know what that says, but there's very little on ancient Israel. I did not go into the Jewish tradition, and I didn't go into the Muslim tradition. So then I started wanted to look a little bit more into this. Okay, so let's go into the timeline of the Bible when it comes to Abraham. Now, where was this? Come over here. Now, if you see this map, we're going to be zooming into Iraq in this area, Kuwait, Bahrain, Baghdad, and Iran. This was and a little bit of Syria and Turkey and such. This is where Mesopotamia was. And there's 2 very important cities there. But we're going to focus on one in Mesopotamia. This is not the largest city. This is not the first city, which we talk about next month when we go over Mesopotamian history. This is the city of Ur. Ur of the Chaldees. So Ur was the city that Abraham came from. Now, in the Bible, it just tells of him leaving Ur to go to Haran. Now, in Haran is the city that Abraham goes before he leaves his father. His father dies in Haran. That's basically all that you know about his father. Okay. And this is, again, what we get from the Bible. So you have God at that point, or around that point, let's say the approximate time that Abraham was born was about 2166 BC. Because then you have when God called Abraham, which is in the book of Genesis, it's fairly close. So talks about his birth and living in Ur in Genesis 11, 27 to 28. Talks about his travel to Haran, Genesis 11:32. So within 5 verses, it goes through his younger life. And there's a point where I'm bring this. And then he's called by God at age 75 years old. So he leaves leaves Ur to get to Haran between somewhere in his first 20 years. Now, by the time he's 75, about 2091 BC, he gets a calling from his God, from God. And God basically says that you will be a father of many nations. So this is a great nation that's going to be there. And so at this point, Abraham is traveling. He's nomadic. He's a nomadic person all over the Arab Peninsula, Mesopotamia, nomads everywhere. People traveling from place to place. But Abraham, around this point, and this is Genesis 12, so it's within one chapter of each other, and within just a few verses of each other, he travels to Canaan, the land of Kenya. Now, Kenya, he doesn't stay in that long. Well, he stays in his whole life, but the people that he creates, the Israelites, do not stay there that long. Okay, so during this time that he's in Canaan, he actually travels down to Egypt to escape a famine. Now, we talked about this last time. Do we know which famine? No. When we talk about Joseph going into Egypt, do we know which famine? No, because there's famines all the time. It's whenever the Nile goes down. And you want to talk about climate change in these days? I mean, people are having droughts nonstop over in the Nile all the time. And the Nile is still running today. Okay, so they go to Egypt, and Abraham basically has to say, Sarah's my sister. Oh, sorry, Sarai at the time. Sarai's my sister at the time. And so the Pharaoh's like, oh, well, I'm going to marry her then. And as he's bringing her into the house, God doesn't like that. God actually curses the Pharaoh's house, and he finds out that he was lied to by Abraham and that Sarah was actually his wife. So this is a sticking point for Abraham. When he leaves Egypt, he escapes Egypt, and he comes back into Canaan. Now this is also where he separates from Lot. He tells Lot, okay, you can have we have two different places. You pick, and I'll take whatever's left when it comes to land. Well, at this point, God's given another covenant to Abraham. This is around 2081, about the time he's about 85 years old. And the reason why I'm giving you all this religious part, as far as also historical, is because you need to understand this in order to understand the second part with the Quran. It's, again, fascinating. Whether you believe in the Bible or not, it's fascinating. Okay, so then what happens? 2081. He's given another covenant by God, and he's told that he's going to have children. Abraham was like, I'm 85 years old. I don't have any kids. Well, because of this, Sarai, who's now changed to Sarah, now has this desire to make sure that her husband actually has children to fulfill that covenant, and gives her handmaiden to Abraham to have a child. And so they have a child, and his name is Ishmael. Okay, so about this time, he is having this child. Well, then Hagar, the handmaiden, basically is not, according to the Bible, Sarai at the time and Hagar are not doing very well. And Sarai basically chases her off. Well, she comes back and things are settled. Well, because another thing that's very important, by the time he turns 99, he gets these people coming, angels coming to visit him and saying, you will have a son. He said, I'm 99 years old. I'm 100 years old. How am I going to have a son? My wife's been barren for the last 100 years, or whenever they got married, 80 years. How in the world am I going to have a multitude? Well, during that covenant, the last covenant, his name is changed from Abram to Abraham, which means father of multitudes. I mean, that's according to God, telling him your name is going to be Abraham, but you have no kids. You have Ishmael, but you don't have any kids through Sarah. Ouch. That would be a little bit hurtful or hard to swallow, right? Well, then Genesis 17. So again, we're going from 11 to 17. So within 6 chapters. Abraham has Isaac. So God fulfills his promise. He has Isaac. This is also about the time when Sodom and Gomorrah is said to be destroyed. I bring this up because of something very important that's going to be coming up. And so, yeah. So birth of Isaac, this basically happens around 2066, right after Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed, the year after, and Abraham is 100 years old. Now, Sarah gives birth to Isaac, as the promise said. So Hagar and Ishmael are sent away. They are, according to the Bible, they're sent away. Now, then at this point, during the same year, it's about 2055. So now Isaac's about 11 years old, and Ishmael is about, let's see, he was born, what year was he born? Looking through my notes, should have marked this down. Isaac is born, yeah, here we go. Isaac is born around 2080. It is now 2055. So that is, Ishmael is basically 25 years old. And Isaac is 11. So at this point, Abraham is told that he has to sacrifice Isaac at an altar. He's like, I can't do this. Well, there's some reason why this is very hard for Isaac, a lot harder than you might think, just by knowing this story. It's not just that he's the son, his only son. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that. Sorry. And so, if you know the story, he brings Isaac to the mountain, and a ram is provided by God. God basically says, "Stop! Don't kill your son. I want to know if you had to actually do this. Here's a ram. Sacrifice the ram." And again, we're going to get back to why that's so important. All these things come together. So we will be getting to all these different things. Then you have around 2030, Sarah dies. She's 127 years old and dies. Now, at that point, there's the marriage of Isaac around 2026, where somebody has to go out, and one of the servants has to go out and finds Rebecca and brings him back to marry Isaac. Okay. Then there's a few other things. We're not going to go into everything because that'll be Wednesday when we go through Isaac's life. But then we have the death of Abraham around 1991 BC. He's 175 years old. He dies 35 years after his wife, Sarah, dies. Okay, so there's a lot of information there, a lot of timeline. Now, again, this all comes from the Bible. And usually when you hear it from one source, you may be doubtful of the historical part of it. So let's go to another source. Let's go to the Quran. Okay, again, competing sources. One is Judaism or Christianity, and the other one is Islam. They've never really found much of a connection together. But let's bring them together. Okay, so you have in the Quran the early life of Abraham. And this is substantial because of what I'm going to show after this when it comes to the Talmud and the Midrash. Okay, so this is the birth of Abraham. He's born into a society deep in idolatry. The worship of idols. Okay, this is Babylon. This is Mesopotamian city. So this is, again, the city of Ur. In the Quran, it also is Ur. So the father, Azar, is an idol maker. Now, in the Bible, his name is Terah. In the Quran, his name is Azar. Okay, so again, translations, different names, same person. So he's an idol maker. So he creates idols, and Abraham, as a young child, figures out that I don't believe in polytheism. I don't believe in multiple gods. So, and in the Quran, he's not Abraham, he's Ibrahim. Ibrahim is starts to challenge the community and actually starts teaching people against polytheism. So, and this is again according to the Quran. He even uses celestial bodies, being the moon, the stars, and the sun, to conclude that there is a divine background and a one true God. Again, not the religious part, we're going historical. Abraham then destroys the idols in the temple, leaving the largest one to challenge the people, to ask them, this idol destroyed all these other idols. I didn't do it. It was the idol. He left one big idol, and he said that the other idol was jealous of the rest of them. He was poking fun at the thought of polytheism and the worship of idols. And so at this point, the people attempted to burn Ibrahim alive as punishment for his actions. But miraculously, God protected him and made the fires cool and made him safe, got him out of there. Now, then he leaves his hometown of Ur and leaves for Haran. Now, it actually doesn't say Haran yet. Here it actually talks about, in the Quran, it talks about he leaves for Canaan, the area of Canaan. So he travels, and his father, according to this, doesn't travel with him. Though during the Bible it says that he went to Haran and then left his father there and then went to Canaan. So there's a part that's missing in this, and then there's a part that's missing in the Bible when it comes to that. And again, these are as far as we can tell of what could have happened. And again, keep going, because I've got one part that's going to be coming from Jewish history that you're going to need to hear to bring all this together. So he migrates, for God's sake, into Canaan. He's promised a righteous son. Now, this is interesting because in the Quran, it actually talks about his righteous offspring is Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael being Islam and Isaac being Ishak. So, and this was to carry on his legacy and to fulfill the covenant with God. So the Abrahamic covenant is actually considered by the Muslims to include them. The Bible basically includes, actually it's not, the Bible basically has it so it's set for just the tribes of Israel. Now, here's the interesting thing. So, in the Bible, it even talks about this. Everyone knows the Bible, Jacob had 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. Which if you read the Bible, you'll actually also know that Ishmael also had 12 princes, 12 tribes of his own for the Arab people. Very interesting. This is very interesting history. Okay, so then, again, the reason why I told you about Isaac and Abraham, and Isaac when he was 11 years old, well, in the Quran, it actually talks about the test of sacrifice. So Abraham is asked by God to sacrifice his son. Now, the Quran does not actually say which son it is. It's tradition that makes him think that is Ishmael, but it does not actually specify which of the two sons that he had to sacrifice on the mountain. And because Abram actually listened, a ram was provided for him. Interesting. Then there's the preaching to the people in Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, according to this, Abraham pleaded with angels sent by God to destroy the sinful cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, the Bible says that messengers came and told him that they were going to destroy it. And basically, Abraham said, if there are 10 people in there that are righteous, and God said, if there's 10 people, I will not destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so continuing on, this is part where things actually change for the Bible and the Quran. So at this point, Isaac leaves and goes to Mecca. Actually, this is actually according to the Quran, is actually before the birth of, before the sacrifice of Isaac, that Abraham travels to Kaaba, and that would be Mecca, in Mecca, and basically creates a sanctuary for monotheism worship. And he prays to the city of Mecca to prosper and remain for a true God. Now, as you know, with Muhammad, it didn't actually stay, and it became a polytheistic city. But interesting that they would actually have Abraham going there, and then coming back for Sodom and Gomorrah, back to Canaan, and then it jumps basically to his death. Now, here's the interesting part, because the Bible told of a lot of different things happening before the death of Abraham at the time. Okay, so now we got two different witnesses having little differences than the side. Now, if a judge saw that, they'd say, okay, strike out those pieces, but the rest of them, I can somewhat put an understanding that they might be true. Not saying that they are true, but putting an understanding that they might be true. Well, that's when, all of a sudden, we go to the next document. Okay, so now we're going to the Midrash and the Talmud. Now, this is where a lot of these things come together. Now, in the oral tradition and the written tradition of the Jews, they actually have where the Midrash and the Talmud are other sources of this information outside of Genesis and outside the Torah. So let's go through basically the rundown of what they both say together, or also other ancient traditions by the Jews. So Abraham is born in the city of Ur of the Chaldees. His father is Terah. He's an idol maker. Oh, wait a second, that's the same in Quran, but not in the Bible. Who served King Nimrod, a ruler who is associated with rebelling against God. Now, Jewish tradition portrays Terah as deeply involved in idolatry, and also providing the contrast of Abraham's eventual monotheistic faith. Now, Abraham discovers that there is a God on his own, of a single creator. And one famous Midrash recount is how he observed the stars, the moon, and the sun, and that how there had to be a single God, a one true God from this. So this is the part that gets funny, though. This is the part I always laugh at when, because I know about the traditions, not from the Torah or the Midrash, or even for the Quran. I've known about this part for a while. So, according to these two documents, these two Jewish documents, he goes into the shop. Now, Terah's shop, it says, and he destroys all his father's idols, except for one, the biggest one. And he says, "Dad, your idols are destroyed." And his father's like, "What happened?" "Must have been the big one. The big one got upset that he was jealous of all the other ones." Again, making fun of idolatry. And so, now here's the interesting thing. Abraham did this sarcastically, showing basically that the idols had no power whatsoever. Now, this incident seems to be an early display of his opposition to the idolatry, but it also causes a big stir. So he challenges Nimrod, the king over Babylon. And Jewish tradition often ties Abraham's defiance against idolatry into the confrontation with Nimrod. And Nimrod basically gives him the trial by fire, which means he's going to sacrifice Abraham with his father knowing it. Now, according to the Midrash, Abraham was miraculously saved, demonstrating God's favor and protection of Abraham. Interesting, because that was not in the Bible. That was in the Quran and is in the Jewish tradition. So, Abraham's teachings and leadership send him in a large direction, but he gets married before he leaves Ur. So after surviving the fire, he gets married to Sarai, who then becomes Sarah later on. And he takes Sarai and Lot, his nephew, and leaves. Now, in the Jewish tradition, it doesn't actually talk about his father going with him. But we know from the Bible that Terah came to Haran and then left. Now, but in the Jewish tradition, it actually does talk about how he moved to Haran. And so this is quite interesting as well, because he went there and then he went to Canaan. So these, again, are Jewish traditions. These are, the stories come from 3 different sources, actually 4 different sources, but Jewish tradition, biblical, and Quran. And they all talk about the same thing. They leave out small things. They don't say all of them, but they're all basically saying the same thing when it comes to history. Again, if you don't want to believe in the religious, that's up to you. But when it comes to the historical, you cannot demonize a source just because you don't like it. And a lot of people don't like the Bible. They don't like Christianity. They don't like, some don't like the Quran. Some don't like Jewish tradition. They don't like the Jews. But here's the thing. All these documents, which are written thousands of years ago, have to be given some sort of volition because they are part of history. Okay, so that's all I'm going to give you today. I'm up to my 30 minutes, so I'm going to let you go. Think that over. Now, tomorrow, it gets even better. Really, it does. Because it's going to bring a lot of these things together. So, thanks so much for joining me, and we will catch you tomorrow. Oh, no, we will catch you Thursday on this. So, today's Tuesday. We're going to catch it on Thursday with the story of Ishmael and Isaac. So, thanks so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.